One afternoon, I got a call from an unusual person. It was Sarah, my best friend who stole my boyfriend Charles a decade ago. Reluctantly, I decided to answer the phone. Right off the bat, Sarah says something shocking. I had twins. I need a baby shower gift of $30,000, please. After steal Charles from me, I can't believe your statement. I feel so mad, but seeing John looking worried by my side, I can calm down. That's right, I have John with me now. Sarah, hearing my silence, pressed me for a reply. With a cheerful voice, I responded to her. Sure, I'll go with my husband, the bank president. What? I could hear Sarah's incredulous voice. I continued. I got remarried. Why didn't you tell me? Obviously, I didn't want you stealing again. We're best friends, aren't we? As Sarah accused me of being cold-hearted, I couldn't help but smile sweetly. Then, I slowly replied to her. You were the one who betrayed me first. At that, Sarah was at a loss for words. I hung up the phone unilaterally and explained the situation to John beside me. And so, I decided to carry out my plan for revenge. My name is Elizabeth Green. I'm a 45-year-old homemaker. I was enjoying a happy marriage with my husband and our 2 children. My husband, John, and I are remarried. John was a single parent with 2 children already. Meeting John, I wanted to be there to support him. That's why I decided to marry John. John is incredibly kind and family-oriented. Despite being busy with work, he helps out with household chores and childcare. I loved him for that. Conversely, I still think my first marriage was a failure. I met my ex-husband, Charles, online. Around the time I turned 30, I happened to match with Charles and, because we got along well, we ended up getting married. After getting married, I realized Charles and I didn't share the same interests or values at all. But by then, it was too late. Still, both Charles and I tried to make concessions in the beginning. The dark clouds over our marriage began to gather a year into it. It started when my best friend came to visit our new home. That visit would fall me to rock bottom and suffered. Hey, Elizabeth, can I come over to your place? Sarah. That was my best friend Sarah getting in touch. She couldn't attend our wedding due to her schedule, so she wanted to come over on a convenient day to celebrate with us. Could I come over when your husband is also home? I'd like to greet him. I'd love that. Please do. Sarah has been my best friend since high school. She was the first one to talk to me when I enrolled. Despite everything, she's still a dear friend. I gladly accepted Sarah's offer. I didn't imagine it would lead to such an ordeal. The following week, Sarah came over with a lot of gifts to celebrate. Nice to meet you. I'm Sarah, Elizabeth's best friend. Nice to meet you. My wife always speaks so highly of you. Sarah smiled brightly and greeted Charles. Then she followed him into the living room. I walked behind them and then headed to the kitchen. I'd like some tea. Me too, then. Charles, who usually drinks coffee, opting for tea was unusual. From the kitchen, I sighed looking into the living room. Do you have tea? While talking to me, Charles was completely captivated by Sarah, not even looking my way. Sarah has always been beautiful, and she's even more so now, so I understand why he'd be mesmerized. But what do you think about this attitude even if a married man? I responded, thinking just that. Yeah, we have it because we never drink it. Sarah, couldn't you drink coffee? I can, but... Sarah said that and then glanced over at Charles. I like Sarah, but I honestly don't like that gesture of hers. Because whenever Sarah does that, most men end up doing whatever she wants. She came all this way. Go ahead and get it for her. As expected, I sighed at his request. Sarah, though looking a bit troubled, didn't say she'd rather have coffee. Reluctantly, I went out to buy some tea. After purchasing it at the nearest supermarket, I walked back home. Then, my phone rang. It was Charles. Sorry, but could you also pick up some cake on your way back? What? Wait a minute. Charles hung up without waiting for my response. No matter how many times I called back, Charles didn't answer. He must be having a great time chatting. With no other choice, I stopped by a bakery before heading home. I'm back. Oh, welcome back. As I entered the living room, I noticed the window was open. Both of them were dressed lightly, so maybe it was too warm inside. I thought they could have just turned off the heating as I spoke up. Was it too warm? Yeah, it was a bit warm. You could have turned off the heating. Yeah, that would have been a good idea. Charles seemed somewhat flustered. There was nothing unusual in the living room, and Sarah was smiling at me. I felt uneasy, but pretended not to notice and served the cake. Please, enjoy. Elizabeth, thank you. Sarah thanked me cheerfully. She chose a piece of cake, then sat down next to Charles to eat. Watching them made me feel uneasy. But since Sarah always feels close to people, I thought it was useless to say anything and tried not to dwell on it. Hey, Elizabeth, Charles is really wonderful, isn't he? Do you think so? I responded shyly to Sarah's words. Then Sarah smiled beautifully and continued talking while placing her hand on Charles's knee. Absolutely. He's so handsome and above all, a banker, right? That's wonderful. Thank you. You're wonderful too, Sarah. I'm flattered. Charles is a banker, and he had just recently been promoted. He seemed very pleased with Sarah's compliments. Though the three of us were supposed to be together, it quickly turned into a world of just the two of them. I felt somewhat uncomfortable and quietly ate my cake before moving to the kitchen. Charles, can I come over again? Of course, please do. Right, Elizabeth? Finally hearing my name, I looked up. That's when I first noticed Sarah leaning on Charles. You can come, but isn't that a bit too close? Elizabeth, are you jealous by any chance? If you're too controlling, Charles might not like it, you know? It's not about that. As I spoke more strongly in response to Sarah's teasing, Charles frowned. Elizabeth. That's rude to Sarah who came all this way. Apologize. What? Apologize. Charles had never raised his voice before. So, I opened my eyes wide in surprise. It's okay, Charles. I'm not mad. Right, Elizabeth? We're best friends, aren't we? Sorry. As I reluctantly apologized, Sarah looked very pleased. Beside her, Charles also looked at Sarah with a kind face. Seeing that made me feel terrible. Sarah stayed for dinner and left, but she clung to Charles the whole time. And finally, she hugged Charles before leaving. Sarah is really beautiful, isn't she? Did you enjoy flirting with my best friend? Are you jealous? No. After Sarah left, when I blamed Charles with a stern face, he immediately became sullen. What? It's not jealousy but envy because Sarah is beautiful. That's not good. It's not that. Give me a break. I'm going to bed. You should clean up. With that, Charles quickly went to the bedroom. Left alone, I cleaned up while crying. From that day on, Charles's behavior became noticeably strange. I don't need dinner today. What? Again? You got a problem with that? It's not that but... Charles started eating out about half the week. He said he was busy with work, but he seemed too cheerful for that to be the case. I had a bad feeling but tried not to think about it too much. Make sure you iron my shirts properly. Don't embarrass me. Yeah, sure. Since the day Sarah visited, Charles began to treat me with disdain. It was incredibly sad and painful. Once, I asked Charles why he was acting this way. But he just glared at me, not bothering to respond. Just do the housework quickly instead of worrying about that. Charles said that and stopped helping around the house altogether. On days when he said he didn't need dinner, I watched Charles leave eagerly, feeling lonely. A month into this routine, Sarah suddenly showed up one weekend. Elizabeth, I have something I want to talk about. Sarah, I told you to wait. But I really have to. The conversation at the entrance made me realize my worst fears had come true. Since when? Charles answered awkwardly. Since the day Sarah visited. Hearing that, my world went dark. Then Sarah spoke to me. I thought it was wrong. After all, he's your husband. But I've fallen for Charles. Sarah said this with teary eyes, and Charles moved closer to comfort her. Honestly, I had a feeling something like this would happen ever since I first introduced them. But I looked away. Are you going to divorce me? I'm sorry. But I've fallen in love with Sarah. Please don't blame Sarah. Charles's words hit me like a blunt instrument, bringing anger and shock simultaneously. Why do you get to decide that? I'll despise both of you. Fine, but it is not her fault. Do whatever you please. Unable to bear seeing my loved one protect his affair partner, I yelled, and Sarah flinched. Charles hugged her as if to protect her. I felt like I was going insane. I divorced Charles soon after. I moved away. Rumors told me they married soon after, and while I grieved, I started a new life. Fortunately, I found a job quickly. By the time I got used to work, I had a new boyfriend, and I gradually stopped thinking about Charles and Sarah. My new boyfriend, John, is a very kind man. John is divorced and he has 2 kids. Despite his busy work life, he's fully committed to parenting, and I completely fell for him. John loves me with all his heart. John introduced me to his children early on, and they got along with me well. Then, after dating for about 3 years, we got married. Surrounded by blessings from everyone, I decided to support him by quitting my job and becoming a housewife. I am living every day happily. I no longer thought about Charles and his life, enjoying a smooth-sailing marriage. However, trouble can strike unexpectedly. One afternoon, I received a call from an unexpected person. It was Sarah, my best friend who stole my boyfriend Charles a decade ago. Reluctantly, I decided to answer the phone. Right off the bat, Sarah says something shocking. I had twins. I'm expecting a baby shower gift of $30,000, please. After stealing my happiness, the nerve she had. I feel so mad, but seeing John looking worried by my side, I can calm down. That's right, I have John with me now. Sarah, not hearing a reply, pressed me for an answer. With a cheerful voice, I responded to her. Yeah, I'll come with my husband, the bank president. What? Sarah's incredulous voice came through. I continued. I got remarried. Why didn't you tell me? Obviously, I didn't want you meddling again. We're best friends, aren't we? I couldn't help but smile at Sarah's declaration of cruel. Then, I slowly replied to her. You were the one who betrayed me first. At that, Sarah was lost for words. I hung up the phone unilaterally and explained the situation to John beside me. That's when we decided to go through with a revenge plan. We discussed and fine-tuned the plan together. There was something I had originally thought of right after my divorce but had forgotten because I was enjoying my time with John. But if they were going to bring it up again, that's a different story. Go ahead with it, full force. Yeah, thank you. I thanked him and nodded. Then, I repeatedly simulated the reunion with Sarah set for the following week. On the day, I headed to the address Sarah gave me and rang the doorbell. Welcome. And your husband? Yes, that's right. I didn't know you remarried. You could have told me. How dare you say that after what you did? Sarah's face clouded over for a moment at my words, but she still ushered us inside with a smile. The interior of the house, larger than the one Charles and I had lived in, was scattered with brand-name clothes and bags. They were all presumably belonging to Sarah. You still like luxury items, huh? Yeah, I guess. But I actually prefer simpler things. Despite my question, Sarah oddly responded to John. Come to think of it, it was the same with Charles. I remembered this and felt like shouting right there and then. John stopped me. Sarah, Elizabeth asked you the question. I don't particularly have anything I want to ask. Oh, is that so? Sarah looked taken aback and deflated. Just seeing that cheered me up. Thank you. You're welcome, John said with a smile, reaffirming my belief that he's my greatest ally. Entering the living room, we found Charles lounging around. He looked up in surprise when he saw me. Elizabeth, why are you here? Why? Because Sarah invited us. Huh? Sarah, why did you invite her? Charles looked puzzled. And he was even more surprised when he looked behind me. The president. Why are you with Elizabeth? I remarried. This is my husband. Huh? You remarried? Charles kept looking back and forth between me and John. His attitude was so rude that John's brow furrowed. Do you have a problem with my wife? No, of course not. Charles straightened up and replied, looking rather pathetic. Sarah, perhaps thinking the same, sighed exaggeratedly. But Sarah does not end it. Nice to meet you, Elizabeth's husband. I'm Sarah, Elizabeth's best friend. As she said this, leaning towards John, he sidestepped her. Yet Sarah didn't give up. You're very handsome. What's your name? I see no reason to tell you. What? That's cold. Come on, it's okay, right? Sarah reached out and touched his arm. In an instant, he knocked her hand away. Ouch! Sarah! What do you think you're doing to my wife? Charles glared at John, reacting to Sarah's small cry of pain. Then John, looking utterly exasperated, turned to Charles and said, First off, your wife was the one who suddenly touched me. And you don't think that's pitiful for Sarah? Not at all. Rather, I think it would be better if she reflected on her frivolity of easily touching another man while being married. At John's words, Sarah's face turned bright red. She seemed so embarrassed that she glared at John. Facing Sarah, I then spoke up. Sarah, there you go again, trying to take someone else's man. What? Did you think I hadn't noticed? I pulled out a photo from my bag and scattered them. The photos showed many men. Seeing this, Sarah's face turned pale. What is this? These are photos of Sarah's ex-boyfriends. Well, Sarah is beautiful, after all. Yes, she is. But that doesn't give her the right to repeatedly steal others' partners. Charles also turned pale, recognizing the situation, but then he suddenly picked up one of the photos. Hey! Is this a recent photo? Yes, that was just taken yesterday. Upon hearing this, Charles glared at Sarah. He thrust the photo at Sarah. That showed her walking arm in arm with a young man. What? Why do you have this? Hey! Didn't you say you were staying at your mom's house because she was sick yesterday? Charles raised his voice. Sarah tried to make excuses, has SHFTY eyes, but it was clear Charles doesn't trust her. We're getting a divorce. I'll leave you. Why does it have to come to this? As the two started arguing, I stopped them. The conversation wasn't over. I showed them another photo. This time, Charles turned as pale as a ghost. What is this? This shows you, doesn't it? Charles panicked and shook his head at John's words, but the photo clearly showed his face. Faced with undeniable evidence, Charles slumped down. Please, anything but being fired. I can't just let someone who embezzled stay. That can't be. Indeed, Charles had been skimming money from the bank. This was discovered shortly after we started planning. It was when John hired a detective. With discrepancies frequently appearing in Charles's department and rumors of his lavish lifestyle, John had his suspicions. To think you'd not only hurt and discard my wife but also harm the bank. You're disqualified as a banker. I'm sorry. I needed the money, I'll pay it back. I can't accept your apology. At John's words, Charles knelt down, utterly defeated. Sarah looked down on him as if he were trash. And you said your salary went up recently, was that a lie? It's because you always splurge on luxury item. It's your fault for not earning a high salary. You're the worst. How dare you? Charles glared at Sarah. However, Sarah, thinking she was superior, didn't even flinch. I handed her a document. It's not something someone in debt should be saying, right? How do you have that? If you'd borrowed from a legit place, the interest wouldn't have skyrocketed like this. I'm so sorry. I said this to Sarah and then made a phone call. After finishing the call, I turned back to Sarah. Sarah, you were popular back in the day, right? So what? But did you know, behind your back, you were actually disliked? Sarah looked at me with a stunned expression. In fact, during our school days, Sarah was really disliked behind the scenes. Her cute appearance making her popular with boys. But her bad attitude and habit of stealing other people's boyfriends made her resented by girls. As I explained this, Sarah looks frightened because she had never realized this. You said I was out of my league, but you were just disliked and people keep their distance from you. That's a lie! As proof, nobody invited you to their weddings, did they? Sarah's face showed shock. I had thought of her as a best friend and never imagined she would go after my partner, so I invited her to my wedding. Although Sarah couldn't attend due to her schedule, if she had, I might have been criticized by my other friends. Reflecting on this now gave me shivers. However, Sarah seemed too preoccupied to notice my reaction. Lies. I was popular and beautiful. That's why I was out of my league. Sarah's muttering was honestly eerie. After a while, she suddenly snapped to attention John. Then she approached John, attempting to lean on him. Hey, John, I'm beautiful, right? John silently avoided her. Frustrated by his reaction, Sarah reached out and grabbed John. Why are you avoiding me? Because it was creepy. Creepy? Yes, like a witch. Sarah, having lost all her composure, was flustered and her hair was disheveled. Seeing this, I thought John's words were spot on. John continued, clearly and firmly. My wife is more beautiful than you, so I have no interest in you. More beautiful than me? Impossible. No, it's true. Both in the beauty of her heart and her appearance, my wife is the best. John's words made me well up. However, Sarah was furious, having been told I was more beautiful. Elizabeth is more beautiful? Are you blind? Then the problem is with your brain. What? John kept stirring up her, and Sarah was getting agitated. As we were going back and forth, the doorbell rang. Seeing the visitor, Sarah turned pale. No way. Good luck with your debt repayment. No. As Sarah screamed, the door opened, and Mafia entered the room. They took Sarah away with them by force. Charles watched, trembling, without attempting to save his wife. Seeing him like that, I thought how right I was to have divorced him. It was painful and hurtful, but thank you for falling for Sarah. It seems my thoughts were showing on my face. Charles glared at me. What's so funny? Huh? Nothing. Just thinking this is what they mean by you reap what you sow. If it weren't you, I could have been happy. No way. You're both drowning in debt. Unable to argue against my words, Charles was grinding his teeth in frustration. To him, I smiled sweetly and handed over a thick envelope. What's this? A baby shower gift. It's the $30,000 Sarah asked for. Aren't you going to show me the kids? They're at my parents' house today. Wait, $30,000? Yeah, you need money. Right? Yes, the amount of $30,000 was actually the alimony paid to me by them at that time. Burdened by debt, Sarah likely intended to use it to pay off her debts. The kids were left at Charles's parents' house because Sarah never intended to show them to us from the start. I then dropped another bombshell. Well, I hope those kids are really yours. What do you mean? Oh. Charles's face turned pale as he understood the meaning of my words. If Sarah has dated with a fair partner before the pregnancy, there's a high chance he's the father. It seemed Charles had just realized this.
But Sarah said they look like me. Of course, she would say that to avoid being caught. All your words are lies. Huh? I'm not so idle to lie. If Sarah hadn't called, I never wanted anything to do with you again.
As I consistently cut off Charles's words, he gradually lost his momentum. I confronted him further.
This is an old test result. Test result?
Yes. I had it reissued by the hospital. The document I presented was a gynecological test result from when Charles and I were married. It contained certain words.
Natural pregnancy is difficult?
Yes.
So when I heard about the twins, I remembered this.
Charles was shocked by the test result. I had planned to tell him after the test, but Sarah came over the day before I could say anything.
Those kids aren't mine. It's highly likely. Why bring this up now? Revenge?
To Charles's obvious question, I simply smiled. Then John spoke up.
You're behaving yourself at home from tomorrow. Further notice will follow. Dismissal is inevitable. Wait, please. Anything but dismissal.
Charles kept pleading even after that. John returned his pleas with a cold gaze. Then, he made a phone call. Hearing the name of the person on the other end, Charles lost all color in his face.
You called the department head. I told him to properly investigate you.
Charles, pale as a ghost, fell to his knees. And muttered softly.
It's all over.
Yes, it is. Your career as a banker is over. Not just as a banker, but his life seemed to be over, left with nothing but debts. But Charles probably knew that better than anyone. Lacking the energy to glare at me anymore, Charles began to apologize to John.
I'm truly sorry. Please, anything but dismissal.
That's impossible, as I've already said. When John firmly rejected him, Charles then turned to me, begging. Was it that important to him to remain a banker? I couldn't help but feel a certain respect. Charles craved something audacious.
Elizabeth, I'm truly sorry. Is there any chance you could forgive me now?
Do you think forgiving you would save you from being fired?
That's part of it.
I was astounded. I sighed at Charles's confirmation. And stated clearly. Even if I forgave you, it wouldn't erase the fact of embezzlement, and my husband doesn't mix personal feelings with business.
That can't be.
Charles seemed to think he had a lifeline, but now faced despair. Leaving Charles speechless, John and I left their house. Later, I heard that Sarah sent over divorce papers. Charles signed them. It turned out the twins were indeed the children of Sarah's affair partner, becoming a scandal within the bank. I received an apology from my former in-laws. We were estranged during my marriage, but it seems they were just keeping their distance. Charles now is exhausted and he shuts himself in his room at his parents' house. As John declared, he was fired from the bank. His life became a struggle with debts and the demand for the return of the embezzled funds. He was working multiple jobs day and night, without decent meal. He once tried to visit our house in shabby clothes, but was stopped by security before he could even reach the door. I can't find it in me to pity Charles's downfall. Perhaps I might be an insensitive person. But when I think about it, he brought it upon himself, so it's only natural. Since I was already acquainted with Sarah's parents, they were shocked when I told them the truth. It seems they were unaware of Sarah's lies about how she met Charles and that he was my ex-husband. I ended up feeling sorry as they kept apologizing to me. They offered to pay a nuisance fee, but since Sarah's parents weren't to blame, I declined. It's said that Sarah was taken away by mafia, and her whereabouts are now unknown. There was once a letter from her with a postmark near the sea, so she might still be alive somewhere. The twins were being raised by Sarah's parents, but as they are elderly and struggled with childcare, I heard they recently placed them in a facility. It might be sad, but it's probably better than growing up beside Sarah. Realizing how much I've come to dislike Sarah made me acknowledge my feelings. John, as the bank president, has been working hard, and his workdays have been long recently. However, he always keeps in touch, so I have no worries about infidelity. Meeting such a gentleman makes me feel fortunate, and thinking back, the painful divorce seems like it was for the purpose of marrying him, which strangely makes me grateful. He recently hired a new secretary and mentioned wanting to host a home party soon, so watching him prepare barbecue supplies has filled me with happiness. As for me, I've recently been enjoying short trips with the kids. While most are day trips close to home, they are refreshing and fun. John wants to join, but he's been too busy to take time off, so for now, I'm enjoying the moments with the three of us. The older child, already in middle school, still calls me mom and shows affection. The younger one hugs me and says I love you, making every day very happy. And now, a new life is growing inside me. Despite the risks associated with being a first-time mother at 45, I want to take care of this life we've been blessed with. The kids are looking forward to having a much younger sibling, so we plan to decide on the baby's name together as a family of 4.
If it's a girl, I won't let her get married. You're thinking too far ahead already.
We've decided not to determine the baby's gender until birth, accepting John's suggestion, so we're still unsure whether we'll have a boy or girl. Thanks to that, we spend each day imagining our future with either. Despite the hardships, the happiness I feel now seems to overwrite all past sorrows, making me very content with my life. I feel like the future will surely be bright. I was gently stroking my belly with this thought.